Success, wealth, and a mansion with his name on the deed still weren't enough. When he arrived at his gates, the people sworn to keep him safe treated him like a criminal. They denied him enter. What does it take for a man to prove he belongs in his own home? For one black man, to the life he built with his own hands. But he wasn't about to stay silent. What happened next would expose more than just a mistake. It would uncover a deeper truth we all need to face. He was the kind of man many dreamed of becoming. Years of hard work had taken him from nothing to a life of abundance, a sprawling mansion on a quiet, tree-lined street, cars gleaming in the driveway, and the kind of success people said he'd never achieve. To his neighbors, the mansion was just another sign of wealth, but to him it was more than a home. It was proof that sacrifice, determination, and resilience could break barriers. Every corner of that house told his story. Late nights, early mornings, and battles no one else had seen. On that day, as he returned home, he wasn't thinking about the struggles he'd faced. He was thinking about rest, family, and the peace he had earned. But at the gates of the very home he built, something was waiting. Something that would remind him, and everyone watching, that no amount of success could shield a black man from prejudice. As his car rolled toward the tall iron gates of his mansion, he barely thought twice. This was his ritual: drive up, enter the code, and head inside. But that evening, something was different. Before he could even step out, two uniformed guards appeared, their eyes narrowing as if they had just spotted a trespasser. He walked toward the gate with confidence, but the confidence wasn't returned. Instead, suspicion hung heavy in the air. One guard held up his hand. Another tightened his grip on the flashlight at his side. Their faces carried that familiar look, a look he knew all too well. It was the silent judgment that came before the words. And then they came. "Sir, you can't go in there." For a moment he thought he misheard. Couldn't go in? Into his own home? His heart pounded as the guards blocked his path. He explained, calmly at first, that this was his residence, his property. But their eyes never softened. They scanned him, not with professionalism, but with disbelief, as though his very presence at this mansion was an insult to the world they thought they knew. The minutes dragged, and each second chipped away at his dignity. Neighbors slowed their cars, catching glimpses of the standoff. Some stared, others whispered, and a few even smirked, as though watching a man be stripped of his place was entertainment. It wasn't just about entry anymore. It was about identity, about being forced to prove worth in a space he already owned. He pulled out identification, documents, even keys. But it didn't matter. The guards didn't budge. Their posture screamed one thing: "We don't believe you belong here." Every attempt to reason was met with suspicion, and every second of delay felt like a wound deepening in his chest. Anger boiled beneath his calm exterior. This wasn't just inconvenience. It was humiliation. In that moment, he wasn't seen as a homeowner or a man who had worked his way to the top. He was reduced to nothing more than a color, a stereotype, a threat. The mansion he had built to represent freedom now stood as a cruel backdrop to his rejection. And yet, as the confrontation dragged on, something shifted inside him. The guards weren't just challenging his right to enter, they were challenging his very humanity. And he knew one thing for certain: this moment would not end the way they expected. Because while they saw a man being denied, what they didn't see was the storm building inside him. And when it finally broke, the fallout would leave no one in doubt about who truly owned that mansion. The tension reached its breaking point. Surrounded by walls he had paid for, under lights he had installed, he stood frozen outside his own gates, treated like an intruder in the very place he called home. The guards' voices grew sharper, their tone colder. One reached for the radio, muttering words that made his stomach turn. Possible trespasser, refusing to leave. A trespasser. That single word sliced deeper than any insult. It wasn't just a denial of entry, it was an erasure of his identity, a rewriting of who he was. He could feel his pulse racing in his neck, his fists tightening at his sides. Anger burned, but beneath it was something heavier, a crushing weight of humiliation. A small crowd had gathered now. Some watched in silence. Others pulled out their phones, recording every second, and with every lens pointed at him, the air grew hotter, heavier. This wasn't private anymore. This was a public trial of belonging. A wealthy black man, barred from his own home, forced to defend what should never have been questioned. The guards pressed closer, their suspicion escalating. "If you don't leave, we'll have to call the police," one said. Police. The word hit like a spark near gasoline. He had seen too many headlines, too many names turned into hashtags. He knew exactly how quickly a situation like this could turn deadly. For a moment, time seemed to stop. His mansion stood tall behind him, unreachable. His dignity felt stripped away, and the very people paid to protect him now stood as his enemies. In their eyes, his skin had erased his success, his achievements, his humanity. But as fear twisted in his chest, something else rose with it. He wasn't just a victim of this moment, he was the owner, the man in charge. And if they couldn't recognize that, he would make them. Because the next move he made would change everything. The next morning, the mansion stood as tall as ever, but its silence carried the weight of what had happened. The security team, once trusted to protect, was gone, dismissed in a single decision. Their badges, their radios, their authority meant nothing now. He had reclaimed control not through anger but through action. The house was his again. But even as the gates opened freely at his command, the scars of that night lingered. For him, the humiliation wasn't erased by their firing. It remained in every memory of being forced to justify his existence in a place he had built. It was a reminder that no amount of success, no amount of wealth, could shield him from the shadow of prejudice. And yet his story was more than just a personal wound. It was a mirror held up to the world. How many men and women are denied dignity every day, with no cameras recording, no justice to follow? How many more stories like his remain unseen, unheard, and unacknowledged? This wasn't just about a man at his mansion. It was about the dangerous truth that, even when the deed is in your name, society can still treat you like you don't belong. He walked through his doors that day, victorious in one sense, but carrying the burden of a reality that stretched far beyond his gates. And it leaves us with a question that should never have to be asked. If a black man can be denied his place in his own home, then what does that say about the world we all live in?